This time, Blackpool follow the Holloway Road for top flight pleasure ride.
'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case for Oxford United, where it doesn't belong, and our king of the numbers, king of the data, is Jamie Rooney.
The one and done club. Here we go, Graham. And I feel we've been talking a lot about Blackpool in recent times. I have this strange feeling that this has become an obsession for us in all ways that we didn't wish for.
Yeah, I mean, this is the podcast we are both the best prepared for and worst prepared for because we've recorded it once already, then had a tech meltdown. Then we prepped to record it again and still couldn't make the tech work. And now we've gone back to old school dial-up almost, but with very little preparation.
It shows our dedication to this. If there was any doubt that we're not fully committed to this as an unpaid full-time job, I mean, this Blackpool episode absolutely confirms that we are in it for the long game.
And there might be some emergency editing required on the go because at the same time as doing this, this is also now eaten into our prep time for another seaside town beginning with B. So the opportunity for me to mix up Brighton and Blackpool in this pod is really quite high.
Even though we were supposed to be doing Blackpool, we started talking about our prep for Brighton. And I became obsessed as well. So I also might fall into the same trap. And what we're doing, we're promoting that there is an episode of Brighton and Hove Albion. We shouldn't forget the Hove coming soon. That 1983 Jimmy Amelia team. But yeah, I also will try to steer clear of Brighton references in this Blackpool podcast that we are doing for the umpteenth time.
This one's a really interesting one. And one of the reasons we were keen to do it was the Ian Holloway element. And as a tribute to Ian Holloway, I managed to attempt an opening which featured 3 or 4 different metaphors in there, which I think Holloway would have been proud of. So, I mean, that's great. And this is a brilliant era in time. Probably fair to say, this does also see us kind of drifting back into possibly not the greatest sides. We have been doing, we've had 2 great Shankly teams. We've had 2 great Arsenal teams in recent memories. And it's not as though we couldn't have chosen a classic, a great Blackpool team either.
If you look at the catalogue and the history of a Blackpool football team, it's got quite a rich history, especially after the Second World War, with some pretty famous players. But I think we were just drawn like the moth to the light of the charisma and just incredible brilliance of Ian Holloway, almost a caricature of himself. But I think underneath the hood, pretty serious and smart football guy, and probably worth dissecting a little bit more. And that's why I think we've been drawn to this incredible Blackpool journey.
Yeah, there you go. First fit West Country. So Blackpool, before Holloway comes here, so Blackpool are sort of finally on the rise, but their glory years are some way off at this point, aren't they?
They've been around since the late 1880s. They're from the northwest of England, the kind of where football, in terms of the official rules, developed. It's kind of where the league in 1888 was formed and structured. Most of the teams came from the northwest. Blackpool themselves didn't have much of a success. They hovered around in the second tier mostly before the Second World War. But after the Second World War, it really was boom time for the baby boomers of Blackpool. And they made 3 FA Cup finals in the space of 6 years, winning the 3rd of them. And incredibly, the man who got the hat trick, Stanley Mortensen, in that FA Cup final, didn't pick up the Man of the Match award, nor did he have the final named after him.
It's properly harsh, isn't it? It's a bit like describing England's 1966 World Cup final as the Martin Peters final.
Yeah, so we talk about Stanley Matthews. So everyone, I think, who knows football or football history to a degree is going to know who Stanley Matthews is. Would you say, Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'd go as far to say I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the next generation of kids growing up. Certainly, when we were growing up, the Matthews final is essentially the most storied and famous game of football there is. I think it's still sort of, from a history perspective, that is the game everyone knows about. It's kind of the first passing of it. Glorious 4-3. 4-3, is that one finishes?
4-3 against Bolton Wanderers. Yeah, the two Bs.
And I think because of that final, it is possible to kind of, as you've said, I mean, Blackpool have a successful period, but it is possible to perhaps suspect they are a more successful and storied side than, I've just learned the use of the word storied, and I now use it at every opportunity. Most successful sides there is. But actually, they don't do a huge amount after this period either, do they?
No, I mean, it's worth talking through Stanley Matthews a little bit, because I think as well, this 1953 FA Cup final where Blackpool beaten Bolton is called the Matthews final. I can't think of another FA Cup final in English history where the final's named after an individual, especially an individual that doesn't even score the 3 goals. Stanley Mortensen bags the hat-trick. But yeah, the Matthews final is, I mean, I grew up as well being told by my dad and my granddad that Stanley Matthews was, written into English football folklore, because he seemed to be, every time the stories came out, he seemed to be getting older and older when he was playing, until it started in his late 40s. And I think by the time I was a teenager, Stanley Matthews was still playing when he was 89 years old. You know that? Incredibly. But yeah, then they kind of Blackpool go into a bit of a dip after this. But worth noting, they do finish second in 1956 to the Bristol Bees, Manchester United. And it's around about that time, it's not just around about that time, Greg, this is exactly at that time where the first individual European award is given to the Ballon d'Or. And Stanley Matthews is the very first recipient of the Ballon d'Or. So an Englishman, I think at that point he may have been 93 when he won it, but and I think Cristiano Ronaldo will probably go on and win the Ballon d'Or when he's 93 as well, the way that superhuman is developing. So Stanley Matthews wins the first ever Ballon d'Or, and that's worth noting. Blackpool have that in their locker. So their football identity is a lot more richer than probably people may realise.
And they've also got a sort of European pedigree, haven't they?
Yeah, so they dip in and out of the leagues between the late 1950s to the late 1960s. They get relegated in 1971, I think it is. And then the following year, I think it's the 70-71 season, they play in one of our favourite tournaments. And remember, Graham, this is an era where you've got the Watney Cup, you've got 3rd and 4th place playoffs in the FA Cup, and you've also got the brilliant intercontinental European tournament, the Anglo-Italian Cup competition. This is the birth of it. And Blackpool do have European pedigree because they go on and they win that particular version of it.
What a success. The Anglo-Italian. Did they play anyone of any note in that, or is that...
Yes, they do play someone I know. They play 4 games. They win 2, they draw 1, they lose 1. But they play Verona, who are a fairly well-known, established northern Italian football team who had their own success in the mid-1980s, and they play Roma, the giants of the capital. And they come through that, and this is a time where it's 2 points for a win, but you get a point for every goal you score. And Blackpool end up with 15 points, of which 5 of those points would have been amassed by actual points by winning or drawing games. The rest of it came by the virtue of scoring goals. So they're scoring goals. And then in the final itself, they play Bologna, the region of probably the greatest food in the world. And they win that. And on the scoring sheet is a certain John Craven. Do you remember John Craven?
John Craven, Swap Shop, Country File. What a star performance. I didn't realise he was a footballer before. David Icke, John Craven. Wow, there you go. I like that.
You just need Noel Edmonds to complete the set. It's actually the John Craven from the Vancouver Whitecaps fame, the captain who went on and won the one single Vancouver Whitecaps NASL championship in 1979. Previous listeners to the pod will realise we've covered that team. Go back and listen to it if you haven't already.
I like it. Very good. So this Blackpool get relegation from the top flight in 71. It's pretty much downward from there. They get relegated from the second tier in 78. And then they're pretty much bouncing away between those bottom two divisions until sort of, I think it must be the early 2000s or so. They do get up. I think Steve McMahon gets them promoted the first time, and then they make their way into the championship, and that's under Simon Grayson. And when Grayson leaves, they have actually managed to survive. I wouldn't say they've done much more. They managed to survive a couple of seasons in the second tier, but they're very much at this point. It's still a long way. The top flight looks a mile away at this stage when Ian Holloway comes in. Now, Ian Holloway, I initially had this podcast, my opening line to it, as the second coming of Ian Holloway, because this does feel like his an unlikely second chance, because there's an element by which Ian Holloway, as a top level football manager, is sort of done and dusted at this stage. I mean, he's managed 600 games, more than a decade's worth, with, as probably does tend to happen with football managers, I think, sort of diminishing returns.
Yeah, he's had steady spells with both Bristol Rovers and Queen's Park Rangers, both of them for quite sustained long periods of time, especially in the modern age where managers only last a couple of seasons generally if you can't guarantee any success. But yeah, Ian Holloway, he's got a bit of a reputation, a lower league specialist, although his time at Queen's Park Rangers definitely kind of pushed in his profile to the front of the British media. But I think that's because of his character, his charisma.
It's worth noting that QPR, when he joins QPR, they're quite near the bottom of the second tier, and in his first season, he takes them down to the third tier for their first time in their history. But he does get them promoted the following season, and then they're pretty much stabilised in the second tier. But throughout that period, there's a suggestion he might join Leicester. They're kicking around. And I think he ends up on gardening leave at QPR. And in the end, he leaves QPR, doesn't join QPR, ends up at Plymouth, does pretty well at Plymouth. But there's sort of a kind of a turning point moment, isn't there? Because he leaves Plymouth after a year or so to, ironically, take the Leicester job. They were obviously still interested in him. And that goes disastrously wrong. He takes over Leicester, and he takes Leicester down to the third tier for the first time in their history. He's sacked, and he's basically out of football for a year. And he uses that period as, it's quite a reflective period for him.
Yeah, well, I think he takes the gardening leave he had at QPR a bit literally when he is between jobs after the Leicester City experience, because he starts building chicken huts, and maybe that gives him time to reflect on the wider context of what his purpose is in football in the broader world. But yeah, he does one good thing with Leicester. He does win the first game with Leicester, and he's the first Leicester City manager to do that in 50 years. So, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. Ian Holloway.
That is really difficult, though. It's really difficult to not win, to consistently not win. And then, I mean, how many managers have had over 50 years, even allowing for managers staying longer? There must be at least 10, 12, something like that, 15, maybe 20 managers. It's really quite difficult to not win your first. I mean, if you're going to win any game as a manager, and not to spoil too much about the Jimmy Melia story, but I think he wins the first game as manager at Brighton and doesn't win many more games. It's quite a regular thing to do, is win your first game as manager.
Yeah, it's incredible. Leicester City is just an incredible yo-yo football club anyway, and the amount of things they've achieved, good and bad, in the world of football is just incredible when you look at their history. But just on your point, I think Ian Holloway does go into self-reflective mode. He is quoted after, to quote his words, I think he said he did the dirty on Plymouth Argyle, and I think it troubled him. I think it troubled him quite deeply. So whilst he's in his garden building chicken huts and doing a bit of the, I think, to quote from a previous attempt at doing this podcast, Graham, living the good life. I think that's yours. So my apologies for stealing that. I think he reflected on what went wrong in his life. And, because he talks about he was given some really decent values from his mum and dad growing up in a council estate in the West Country. And one of them was about honesty, trust, and loyalty. And Plymouth, he seemed to forget all of those things because when the lure of Leicester City came, he couldn't resist it and terminate his contract at Plymouth, which I think was 3.5 years left to run. So he did the dirty on and then obviously the Leicester City doesn't really work out. And if you fast forward to Blackpool and his experience at Blackpool, when he's got Blackpool promoted, which we'll go on and talk about how he navigates them through the Championship and through the playoffs. Blackpool have an open top celebration for winning the playoff championship. It's quite cute actually. And, the whole of Blackpool turns up and Ian Holloway's first thing is he addresses the crowd and standing up and in front of the fans, the Blackpool fan that made the effort turn up, and he's, where have you been all season? So, just like an interesting insight in terms of how he's thinking. But even on that day where it's all about Blackpool, Ian Holloway still makes a point of talking about, and I think this is a guy who just wears his heart on his sleeve, or maybe some other places sometimes. And he talks about him doing the dirty on Plymouth, and he makes a point, even though he's just got Blackpool promoted, he reflects on the fact that he forgot about honesty, loyalty, and trust and did the dirty on his players after he'd been telling his players, you need to be loyal, you need to be honest, and I need to be able to trust you. So I think he's still troubled going into the Premier League with Blackpool a couple of years later after the Plymouth episode by what he's done. I think he's almost like internalized it, and he's suffering some kind of minor trauma from his behavior.
I think the other thing that happens is he does have something of a football revolution as well in there. And it's difficult to fully remember. I think I could, I'd stand to be corrected by QPR fans as to the quality of football that he played there. I didn't think that he was infamous for this attacking flair, this entertainment, this progressive style of football. And I definitely remember, I've struggled to pin it down, but I definitely remember hearing him do an interview after he got promoted. Before, I've found other interviews with him talking about Arsene Wenger and lots of stuff around that. But I do remember hearing him talking about, some of the football he was watching at that time just made him reevaluate how he set up, how he played. And the one thing you can be clear, and we will talk about going forward, is this is an entertaining style of football that Blackpool play.
Yeah, I mean, Ian Holloway wants to play an open, expansive game of football, and I think he would quite comfortably say, in fact, I've seen him talk about this when he talks about when Blackpool beat Cardiff in the playoff final at Wembley to get into the Premier League. He's prepared to set his teams out to outscore his opponent. He almost accepts that he can't set teams out with the style and the philosophy, go down that road, with the football that he wants to play to keep clean sheets. So if you can't keep clean sheets, you got to score goals. And Blackpool certainly do find a way of scoring lots of goals.
Now, it's also worth saying during this period, Blackpool have been enjoying the dubious ownership benefits of the Oyston family. Now, the Oystons are there for almost 30 years or so. It's a big old time during which they go down and up and down the leagues along the way. It's definitely one of the more troubled relationships with fans. I mean, virtually every member of the Oyston family, it seems, run the club at various points. I won't get into the full details of it all, not least because the Oystons have been pretty litigious with a lot of their own fans, it seems, over the years. But that whole relationship ends really really horribly, and there's like open warfare between the fans and the Oystons, which is pretty spectacular. But one thing that does change around this point is they do have an investor who comes in, a chap called Valerius Balakan, I think it is, who I think is a Latvian businessman.
Sounds right to me.
And the big difference he makes on this is that he sets up a transfer fund for Holloway to tap into. And probably the crucial signing, a very significant signing he makes through that, is Charlie Adam.
Fantastic player. Absolutely fantastic player.
So they signed Charlie Adam from Rangers for $500,000, and he really hits the ground running.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie Adams, I think Alex Ferguson famously said once his corners alone are worth 20 million. And this is going back into 15, 16 years ago. So just kind of gives you an idea in terms of what Charlie Adam was able to conjure. I think this goes back into the style of play, because the way that Holloway generally sets the team up is in a 4-3-3. And Adam is in that 3 with David Vaughan as well, also a pretty tasty left foot. And you've got Blackpool legend who's been there for a long time, Keith Southern, who's doing the dirty stuff. So he's the one that's able to kind of fill in the spaces and protect the defense, but also protect the creative forces that is Charlie Adam. Yeah, he's just it's one of those quality players that just seem to have technical brilliance in abundance. It's strange, we're back into the whole kind of era of cultured left foot, where no one has a cultured right foot, but lots of people have a cultured left foot. But yeah, he really was able to kind of pick passes from distance. He could spot things. He could break the lines with some of his balls. But he could also take a pretty decent free kick as well. So set plays, you can weaponize Charlie Adam to cause the opponent some problems.
So, I mean, he's the top scorer for the club that season. Everything sort of goes through him. It's still not, whilst I say there's kind of funds made available, there's no reason to think that Blackpool are going to get promoted. They scrape through survival. There's no real optimism for that season. And the season's going okay. They're doing all right. That season really seems to, there's a couple of notable kind of signings. Seamus Coleman is on loan for a little bit there. I think he makes a big difference. But a really key signing is DJ Campbell.
Yeah, DJ Campbell are fantastic. William Runner, like a number 9, but also could play out wide. But just an incredible striker with his pace and his willingness just to run the lines. And he plays at the kind of the head of that 4-3-3 that Holloway is trying to play. But yeah, I mean, DJ Campbell's the one they spend money on as well. I mean, he's on loan, I think, originally through the Championship.
Yes, he's on loan for the back end of this season. And he's kind of got goals everywhere he's been. He was at Leicester before, and actually, Holloway, who I think had a newspaper column at the time or something like that, had happily written something about it's unbelievable transfer fees. Leicester spent this money on DJ Campbell. It's absolutely mad, and then ends up managing DJ Campbell.
Yeah,
who does get a few goals for Leicester, and then signing him twice for Blackpool. He's a natural born scorer.
Yeah, he is. And he's done his grafts. He's come through the non-leagues. So he's played in some of the 6th and 7th tiers of football before he gets his break into the pros with Brentford. And then seems to have a liking for teams beginning with B, Graham. I don't know if you've seen DJ Campbell's Wikipedia page, but yeah, he likes a football team that begins with B.
It's one of the priorities for him. That sort of a journeyman and working your way through the leagues kind of fits in with the Blackpool mentality. Obviously, this is a side that's gone up a couple of times over the previous 10 years. And it is built on hard work, and it's built on players who have, a lot of them have played in the lower leagues and haven't had particularly starry past. This isn't a team of stars in any way, is it?
No, there's no major stars in the football team at all. There's just kind of journeyman footballers, as they're called, so players that have been around for some time. And I think a lot of players, probably with the exception of Charlie Adam, reaching their peak with this Ian Holloway team at Blackpool. I mean, Charlie Adam does go on and have a pretty decent time with Liverpool. Gets his big move after his time with Blackpool. But yeah, I think a lot of these players are generally just having the peak, other than Seamus Coleman. But Seamus Coleman only comes in for a very short period. I think his loan is, a month in the March when they're in the Championship, and that gets extended. And obviously, we know that Seamus Coleman goes on to become an Everton legend at fullback, and he's still doing his stuff now. So
Blackpool go on things start to come together, and they go on a sort of great one. But they do, they only squeak their way into the playoffs. They are that classic team which is hovering around mid-table, not looking like much trouble, who suddenly go on a bit of a run. And before you know it, how did they get into the playoffs? And they very nearly don't. They actually draw their crucial last game of the season, and a Swansea win, they would have finished above them. So even going into the playoffs, other than they're on a half decent run, there's no real reason to think that they are going to start. I mean, it's a funny season, isn't it? Because I think Newcastle absolutely storm that league, and I think West Brom go up in sort of style. But you've got Notts Forest in third place. So this is Billy Davis, I think, is manager at the time, and again, and obviously they end up playing each other in the playoffs, semi-finals. Now, there's no real reason to think that Blackpool can win that game.
Nottingham Forest are the unlucky ones out of the three, because Newcastle and West Brom, as you mentioned, are just absolutely storming the Championship. I think both have been relegated the previous season from the Premier League. Newcastle United as a big surprise, and they both jumped straight back into the Premier League. But yeah, Blackpool don't look like they're going to challenge for a playoff place, and they go on this run that you mentioned, Graham. I think they win 6 of their last 7 prior to the game with Bristol City, where they get the draw that confirms it. And the first win of that is critical, because they beat Swansea City 5-1 at home. So Swansea City, the team that miss out narrowly by a point to Blackpool in the end. But that 5-1 is almost the turning point that gives Blackpool the belief. They go on this run. They also beat Nottingham Forest in that run as well towards the end, 3-1. And they're the only team in the Championship to beat Nottingham Forest home and away. So not even Newcastle and West Bromwich Albion, the 2 runaway leaders in that particular season, are able to do the double over Nottingham Forest. But Blackpool do.
And Blackpool, it's worth saying that they are the 3rd top scorers in that division. They are playing how Ian Holloway has decided to set them up. They are playing in a progressive, attacking. I think you might have said on our previous attempt to record this, it's Kevin Keegan style, isn't it? Will score more goals than you. There's no sign they can defend, but they can definitely score.
Yeah, they do. I think, what is it? They bag something like 74 goals in the Championship, which is a pretty good return. And but they have one problem, as we know, they do concede, and that's very much the Kevin Keegan style. But they go into the playoffs, not only with this kind of open style of football, but they go into the playoffs confident that they are the informed team of the Championship. They've won 6 of their final 8 games, and they have to play the team that finishes 3rd, Nottingham Forest, who they've only played a few weeks prior in the league, and come through that 3-1. So there must be cause for optimism from Holloway in terms of how his team is playing, how he's got them right, and the fact that their opponent is a team that they've already beaten in recent weeks.
And they win the first game 2-1, and then I think this semi-final leg, and with that, I don't knowingly know any Blackpool fans. I would think if you're a Blackpool fan, that second leg at the City Ground would probably be one of the greatest games of history, possibly even better than the final itself. So they're behind in the first. They go 1 down in the first half. Again, right up until I think it's like the 55th minute. There's not any clue what's about to happen.
Not Forest have gone a goal up, which makes the tie 2-2 on aggregate. You're 15 minutes into the second half, so you're kind of thinking, wow, this is going to be really tight. This is going to, whoever gets the next goal is probably going to win. Then they go hold out. I don't think many people could predict what was going to happen in the next 35 minutes.
No, DJ Campbell equalises. Forest then score again. I mean, there's a lot, and it comes up in the next game that this resilience to this club. They don't know when they're beaten. So they're 2-1 down. That should, everything says the advantages with the home team, and they keep attacking, they keep going forward, and they don't just get the equaliser on the night. They go ahead and get 3 more goals. DJ Campbell scores a hat-trick. Forest get a consolation, but they win that game 4-3, and they've absolutely, it's that approach that we'll keep on. There's no kind of sitting on the 1 goal lead and just playing out time. They go for it.
If you were to compile a top 10 greatest English Championship playoff matches of all time, even across the old EFL, to be honest, this one's good. It's just an incredible game of football. And it really is the essence of what Holloway is trying to achieve. And that's to just play entertaining, open football where They're going to try to outscore their opponent. And that theme continues.
It definitely does. In the final against Cardiff City, on what is a roasting hot day. You can never, obviously, it's difficult to really remember it there, but I don't really remember. When you rewatch the footage, everyone looks so hot. They all look so hot in there. Holloway on the sidelines looks really hot. Everyone in the crowd looks really hot. And again, Cardiff City would have been fancied to win it, and Cardiff go ahead. In the game, they scored quite early, I think, and again, you're thinking, what, it's another blow they have to come back from. But I think you've got this whole, what's really clear about Ian Holloway, if without having personally been managed by Ian Holloway, I would imagine his powers of motivation are pretty high. I mean, that's pretty clear that's his people management must be what drives it.
Yeah, I think he does it to 11, doesn't he? He really makes players feel. I think he's really good at managing expectations of play. I think he's definitely more the arm around the shoulder and carrot than his stick, but he definitely knows when he needs to use the stick as well. But yeah, I think he just makes players feel 10 foot tall. I think you see this reflected in some of the players that have played for Holloway. They just talk about how he inspires them and makes them feel greater than probably what they really are. So he makes Blackpool much greater than the sum of their parts. I think it's important as well. I mean, just to go back as well, hanging on about Holloway outscoring the opposition. There's a really nice YouTube video that was made a few years ago where Ian Holloway does his coach's masterclass. It's beautiful. You've probably seen this, Graham, where you get a coach that has a board in front and you've got the dials so you can kind of change the shape of a team. And Holloway is listing out the Blackpool team, and they're using the yellow pieces. They're using the white pieces, and Cardiff are the orange pieces, which just feels weird straight away. And Ian Holloway makes a point of that. But he talks through the tactics of the team, and we should break down as well some of the players that are very important to this team. But he says quite openly, I knew going into that game we could not stop Cardiff from scoring. With the quality of players that they have with Joe Ledley and Chopra, that we could never stop Cardiff from scoring. So he had to set his team up to outscore them. And he does this in a really clever way, because we spoke about Charlie Adam, who's the tower in midfield, the one that's kind of almost pulling the strings, controlling the team with his incredibly brilliant reading of the game and his brilliant football. But up front, we've got DJ Campbell, who's playing that central role. At either side, in the 4-3-3, you've got Brett Ormerod, who's a bit of a Blackpool legend, and also Gary Taylor Fletcher, or GTF, I think, as people like to call him. And they're Ian Holloway saying to them, you're centre forwards, but he's put in one on the right and one on the left. But what he's encouraging them to do is to cut inside their fullbacks and also to use space centrally. So not just to play out wide, but to use the space centrally. And he does this to great effect, because both of those guys bagged goals in this £90 million playoff game.
Yeah, no, absolutely is. The final sort of has everything you want from Blackpool. So they go behind. Charlie Adam then scores that's a glorious free kick. And, out of all the places to score on a sunny day on Wembley in a cup final. And I just think there's something about where it's probably only 25 yards or whatever. I think the Wembley pitch makes it look like it's about from 50 yards. It's just a fantastic hit. But again, they go behind. Again, Joe Ledley scores. And then they have, as is sort of a bit prone to happening with this Blackpool side, these mad moments where they just pile on and things happen for them. And Gary Taylor Fletcher gets an equaliser, and then Brett Ormerod scores the winner. And that's at half time. There's still another half to go. I mean, at this point, the game could have finished 6-4. Extraordinarily, it does finish 3-2. But both those players are Ormerod and Taylor Fletcher. They're both sort of, they sort of sum up this story in many ways. Ormerod he scores in every division for Blackpool, which sort of shows. I mean, he has a spell away from the club. He gets a big transfer, I think, to Southampton at some stage. But he's played for them every division, scores in every one. And Gary Taylor Fletcher, I don't think there is a player who better sums up the journeyman nature of this club and the achievement. It's brilliant, and Taylor Fletcher has this amazing ability to score important goals. And as you say, he's an unlikely player to be playing on the wing, but he just rises to the occasion. He reminds me a lot of Alan Cork at Wimbledon in that ability that whatever the level, he just meets it, and whatever the next challenge, he just deals it in the same way and just meets the challenge and is effective wherever he plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's really at the peak in this Blackpool team as well, like so many other players. And another player like DJ Campbell, who's come through the non-leagues, he's done his graft. He's worked his way up and deserving his reward to be in a team that's getting promoted to the Premier League. But yeah, he's. I would imagine that Blackpool fans, don't know this, would probably put Gary Taylor Fletcher as one of their best players they've had because of that incredible tenacity and effort that he has. I mean, I only remember him from the Premier League in this area, but I don't know if it because he has a double barrel surname, although he actually was quite a useful player, but he stands out in my mind.
No, I love him. I think there's something special about the name as well. That he's got three names: Gary Taylor Fletcher, and they're all sort of say journeyman footballer. You could put them in any order. Gary Taylor, Gary Fletcher, Fletcher Gary, Fletcher Taylor. They would all be. And of course, he's also. I particularly love him because there was a brilliant. It crops up on my social feeds every now and then. There was a great letter in Viz one day back in the thing, which I'll read for you now. It's a glorious letter. I'm sick of sports commentators saying you couldn't write a script like this. If people can write scripts about dystopian futures in which life is in fact a simulation made by sentient machines to harness humans' heat and electricity as an energy source, they can probably write one about Gary Taylor Fletcher scoring a last-minute equaliser against Stoke. Now, that letter, he's chosen all the words deliberately. So it's deliberately against Stoke. He's trying to, who's the least glamorous equaliser and who's the least glamorous footballer? And Gary Taylor Fletcher is it. And that's why it's so wonderful that Blackpool, that they take this ride through the playoffs, right up to the top flight. And, well, we will talk about how they do in the top flight in the second half. Yes, so welcome back. We're talking about Ian Holloway's Blackpool, who have gloriously managed to get promoted at the end of the 2009 and 10 season to the Premier League. Now, that they go up through the playoffs shouldn't be a surprise because Blackpool are an extraordinarily good team at the playoffs. And this actually is the third consecutive time that Blackpool have got promoted by the playoffs. And they are the only team that has ever done that. They've gone from the fourth tier to the first tier entirely via the playoffs. It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, that is incredible, actually. I didn't know that. Well, I did know that because you said that the last time I recorded it. But then when you said that the first time, I didn't know that. So I'm going to pretend I still didn't know that.
Yeah, thank you. Fair play. So they win, when they win the final, that is their 9th consecutive playoff win of any kind. They actually then reach the playoffs 2 seasons later, where they also get to the final. So they win their first leg of that. So that's 10 consecutive playoff matches, which they win. They are incredible. So Blackpool have reached the playoffs 9 times. They've only once failed to make it to Wembley. So, I mean, that's already an incredible run. They finished second. They've lost at Wembley twice, and they've won their playoffs and got promoted to the playoffs 6 times. So 6 times out of 9 playoffs they win, which I'd be amazed if anyone's got a better record than that.
Yeah.
You can see where my research stopped. The playoff game, as you referenced before the break, the £90 million match. Now, this has become quite a thing. I think there's a new value almost put on it every time and this is the value of what getting promoted mean, getting to the. I mean, it's why Championship clubs lose money hand over fist in trying to do it. The value, there is so much at stake if you get and actually make it into the Premier League.
Yeah, there is. It's the TV money. So the Premier League has successfully, for almost since its existence, been able to negotiate an incredible amount for TV broadcasters to show their football matches. I mean, I think that the current championship game is valued, I think, around about 200 million. That's how much that's how much you can earn by getting into the Premier League. So, and we've seen that in recent times. Sunderland, who went up via the playoffs into the Premier League most recently, invested around about 160 million, 170 million in buying players in preparation for the Premier League. So you can almost bank on that money is going to be coming in because of the way the Premier League distributes that wealth across its 20 members that are in the Premier League. So back in 2010, it wasn't 200 million, but it was 90 million. So that's a huge volume of money for Blackpool and its custodians to invest in Blackpool Football Club with the idea of keeping them in the Premier League. But I'm not convinced that Blackpool, as a operation, the football club, ever really felt like they was going to stay in the Premier League longer than a season. I think the formula that they had with Ian Holloway, I think they put faith in. And if it worked, great. And if it didn't, c'est la vie. Because they only invest in that summer, and they did quite late on. And it is a World Cup year as well, which is quite important because obviously it does kind of slow things down in the transfer market. So a lot of the investments made in August going into the Premier League season, and they only spend around about 5 million. Now, to contrast that with Newcastle and West Brom, who have gone back into the Premier League as well, they've both spent around about 14, 15 million. So the two teams that have gone up with Blackpool have spent 3 times the amount that Blackpool have invested in terms of players to potentially sustain themselves in the Premier League.
And you're also talking about a team that's gone up. By definition, if you go up through the playoffs, you start your preparation work 2-3 weeks later than sometimes. Like Newcastle would have known they were in the top flight, 6-7 weeks before Blackpool. So you're always up against it when you qualify, when you get promoted through the playoffs, especially if you're kind of unfancied as well. Exactly as you say, lots of nobody expected Blackpool to go up, let alone would back them to stay up. And we did the Derby County team that went straight back down with the record lowest points tally. And that's the problem they have. I mean, they actually probably end up spending more money than Blackpool in doing it, but they are hamstrung by the lateness of having to do it, by probably, even if they wanted to spend the money, would players come to that club because everything works against them? And you're absolutely right. Blackpool, I think they signed 12 players in that window. A lot of them, as you say, quite late on. The most money they spend is the almost 2 million on DJ Campbell, who already know, they know him, he's a proven thing. There isn't, Matt Phillips comes in, but again, you're talking sort of 500,000, not even that. There's a lot of players who come in. That David Carney joins from FC20, which I'll come on to at the end. They bring in, quite a lot of players. They bring in some keepers. They bring Richard Kingston, who's going to be important and then they also sign another 5 players in January. But those are mostly on loan or on end of season deals. So there is a huge change. There are 17 players come in, 17 players go out across this season. But there's not a lot of money in certainly in transfer fees. I mean, obviously wages, signing on fees, there could be all sorts. But in transfer fees, it's a relatively small spend.
Yeah, it is. It's no more than 5 million, and you've kind of showcased the players they brought in. There's a few in there that are undisclosed in terms of who they brought in. They also brought in. I
like the idea that a player was undisclosed that they brought in. They refused to reveal the identity of him, even when he's playing. Who is that cool. Number 7?
Yeah, the mystery sign. That would be fantastic.
It's like the Masked Singer.
The Masked Singer. Footballer. This is brilliant, Graham. Through my stupidity, you flagging my in a very polite way, you've just uncovered a brilliant new game show.
We can confirm we've signed an undisclosed player for 750,000. I quite like the way of doing it there. Then you know, the excitement being a fan, wondering then whether I wonder who it is.
No, and you can get, and the club can give you clues on a almost a day by day basis to try to work out who that potential player is. So, this is a brilliant game show. This is how transfers should be handled going forward, I think.
But they don't do it that way, but they do sign these various players. But I suppose the big question for Ian Holloway is, and it's quite funny, I was reading the match report or a match report of it, as if there's only one. There was a match report the Guardian did of Blackpool having won that final, and they pay tribute to Blackpool, the way Ian Holloway had set the side up, and they're entertaining football. But they made the point, that he cannot be naive enough to play that way again. And they reference Gorman at Swindon. Swindon had gone up. I mean, that's actually mostly under Glenn Hoddle, isn't it, I think? But John Gorman then takes over. And Swindon have a disaster there. But they generally, what you've seen is that, that Swindon example, most sides change their method. You even look at, I don't know, someone like Brentford who went up playing fantastic, really good football, and then they'd become much more pragmatic to get themselves stable in that division and gradually kind of do it. I can only really think of Vincent Kompany's Burnley, who have Bielsa's Leeds, but Bielsa's Leeds is sort of a different example because they were way too good for the Championship anyway, so they were already essentially a Premier League team, and the jump between it. But those two sides maybe have had a go without changing their principles. But Blackpool are in a different position because they weren't the best team in the Championship. They already know the Newcastle are better than them. West Brom are probably better than them. Let alone how they're going to do it in the Premier League. So that article makes clear. It's like Holloway. It's been great the way they've played it, but he can't be naive enough to not change his ways. But he is, and it's fantastic, and that becomes evident within the first two matches of the season how it's going to go.
Yeah, it's an incredible start. They have Wigan away in their very first Premier League fixture, and Wigan at this point are an established Premier League team. They were tipped to go down as soon as they went up, basically on the themes that you've just been outlining in terms of who they are and how they invest. But Wigan do manage to stabilise themselves in the Premier League. And when Blackpool are the visitors, most people are probably thinking this is going to be a home win for Wigan. Wigan are going to get off to a nice start. Doesn't happen that way. Ian Holloway ball turns up.
It's fantastic. 4-0. I think all 4 goals are in the first half, or 3 of the goals are in the first half. They just get it's just that momentum. And there's real momentum about this side, which is I kind of at the top of it. I called it the pleasure ride, and that's what it is. They are riding the roller coaster. They kind of know how it's going to go. But this is probably the one positive thing about going up in the playoffs. It is that shorter running, so you're almost playing before you know it. So you can keep that going when they go 3 up in the first half at Wigan. They're playing away from home. I think there was some work needed at Blackpool, so the first 2 games are away from home. You just think more of the same. We're just gonna do exactly the same. And this is before this is actually a side that is potentially weaker than they went up with, because DJ Campbell hasn't joined yet. Lots of these signings are over the line, and there they go. They go to Wigan, win 4-0, and at the end of the day, or for a period of time, they are top of the league. I mean, they're unlucky. I think Chelsea win 6-0 later in the day. But, this is an unbelievable start. If that worked there, why wouldn't that work at Arsenal?
Absolutely that. I mean, you've got to go with the same philosophy. It's going to work, right? And you're going to see two away wins on the bounce for Blackpool when they go to Arsenal. Incredibly, you can go in the space of 90 minutes, you go from a +4 goal difference to a -2 goal difference. And as you've already said, Graham, if this doesn't highlight and showcase and bullet point what Ian Holloway's football at Blackpool is all about, then this is the moment where you finally get it. I think this is what it's about. It's about gung-ho, going for it football. We might win a few. We're not going to lose a few.
It's incredible. Win 1-4-0, lose the next one 6-0. The 6-0, there is a sending off, which kind of makes a little bit harder for them, but I'm not sure it would make that much difference. They are just going for it. And, we talked about that kind of resilience that they showed going behind in crucial games, and they just deal with the blows, and that belief is just there because actually, I think from memory, that Derby team that has the disastrous 11-pointer, I think they get a point in their first game of the season and then lose very heavily in either their second or third game, and they never recover. And we've seen this from loads of teams. It takes a huge amount because that should be the reality check. That should be, hang on, guys, we're out of our depth here. But the complete opposite happens. Blackpool go on to have, one of the best starts of a promoted team at all, let alone for what you might have anticipated from Blackpool. Things just fall into place for them.
Yeah, I think they win 3 of their first 7 games, and they've almost established themselves in the Premier League in the early window. I think, in fact, when they beat Newcastle 2-0 away, they go 4th in the Premier League. So after 4 games, they're holding a Champions League place. So it's looking even brighter for the future of Blackpool.
Yeah, it sort of goes on for a sort of remarkable period, and they are winning unlikely games. So they lose a couple. They lose one of a home game to Blackburn. They've lost to Chelsea the previous week, and that's when they turn up at Liverpool. Now this isn't a great Liverpool. This is Roy Hodgson's Liverpool, but
I think it's
to go and win at Anfield is quite something. Again, they're 2 up by half time. They cling on. It's a really good 2-1. I think Matt Gilks makes a quite important save towards the end in that. But you're winning games. You keep surprising. You keep, when you think things are going to go against you, they keep winning. I think by the end, they're in the top 10 by the end of Christmas, and they've won pretty much as many games as they've lost. I mean, they've almost got enough points as of December to think they are safe. It's an incredible start, and these players keep surprising, and they're doing it in the same way. They keep scoring. The scorelines, if you look through the scoring, there are a whole bunch of 3-2s. There's the occasional hammering. There's 2-2s in there. There's I think there's only 8 games they don't score in that season. They are scoring goals. I mean, they concede goals, but they are.
Look at their 38 game Premier League. There's only 4 games where you don't get 2 goals or more, which is incredible. There's a couple of goalless draws in there, and I think there's the odd 1-0. But other than that, when you're going to watch Blackpool in that particular Premier League, you're going to see goals. Both ends generally as well. They are entertaining. And some of Luke Varney, David Carney, Luke Varney, I like the little rhyming of that one. He's a loanee. He comes in. So he does play quite a few games. So he is making a difference. He does score that second goal at Anfield. And you've got Craig Cathcart as well, who's come in and almost established himself. So the team shape has changed a little bit, but by and large, it's the championship team. And yeah, you're right. By the 30th of December, Graham, Blackpool are 8th, as you mentioned. They've got 25 points from those 17 matches. So with 21 matches to go, they're probably looking at the fact of, if you're going to get to the mythical, magical 40 Premier League points to ensure Premier League survival, they're going to need 15 points from their last 21 games. It feels, right up until the 30th of December, in terms of how Blackpool's playing and how they're picking up points, that's going to happen. They're going to stay in the Premier League. It
is extraordinary. I mean, it is worth saying 25 points would have kept them up last season, probably on goal difference, without looking at the goal difference. So it is extraordinary. The season was different sort of 15 years or so ago, but they have every reason to believe they might be staying. staying up. There's quite a notable, and it's not particularly notable for the game. They lose, I think, 3-2 to Aston Villa, a game in November. But that's sort of an intriguing kind of test point, isn't it? Because I think they get fined for that, because Holloway basically, for reasons which it's quite an Ian Holloway, it feels like it's quite an Ian Holloway thing to do, because it's a bit OTT, but he basically changes the entire team for that Aston Villa game, which incurs the wrath of the FA.
Yeah, the Premier League. The Premier League had rules in place at the time. I think they called it E20, whereby the Premier League, overstepping their boundaries, I think, will decide if a team is considered to be weakened or not. And this is in the era where the Premier League has set the mandate that you have to have 25 squad members. So we're already in that period where you've got 25 named squad members. So I think Ian Holloway is totally within his rights to pick any of those 25 players to send out in a Premier League fixtures, by virtue of the fact the Premier have asked him to give 25 players in a squad, and that's what they've done. But the Premier League were trying to assert some kind of dominance in terms of their product, I think, in terms of making sure that the teams put out what they considered, the Premier League considered, their best team. Holloway's Blackpool are playing a game every other day through November. That's normal for when you're playing at this level. You know, the Saturday, Wednesday thing is a normal thing. So Ian Holloway is saying that he's managing his players for future matches. They drew to Everton at home the 4 days before, and 3 days after they play Aston Villa, they've got West Ham away. So there are trips to London. But yeah, so I think what the problem that Blackpool had with the Premier League, though, is that Wolves the previous season, Mick McCarthy's Wolves, they'd gone out to play Manchester United. And Mick McCarthy just said in his press conference, yeah, I'm not going to play my best players because we can't beat Manchester United with our best players, so we might as well lose to them with our worst players. And paraphrasing, I don't think he actually said that exactly. And the Premier League came down on Wolves, but, you know, in terms of what that was, because they felt they were devaluing the product of the Premier League. So Blackpool were in breach of E20, the rule where they're playing a weakened team by the Premier League standards, and they were fined £25,000 for that. Now, Blackpool had the option to appeal, but they chose not to appeal because the risk would have been they could have been deducted points. And points, when you're Blackpool playing in the Premier League, are incredibly precious. So they didn't roll the dice and take the risk on that. I don't think Ian Holloway was thinking that. I think he was a much more kind of emotional individual when it came to the punishment from the Premier League. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think he said if this fine stood, he was going to resign. I think Ian Holloway said a lot of things in the. I mean, he essentially, I think, said the same when Swindon fielded an ineligible player in the EFL Trophy, or whatever it's called, the Johnson's Paint Base or whatever. So, I mean, he is prone to a bit of emotion, enthusiasm, heat at the moment. The bit that just seems odd to me about that whole episode, because I think you're right. I think if you're Blackpool, the difference, as we've said, this isn't a team of stars. This is about spirit. It's about camaraderie. It's around belief. And actually, across that 25-man squad, there's probably not a huge difference between Charlie Adam alone, maybe DJ Campbell, one or two others are, some will be informed, some won't be. But what does seem odd to me is the games he chooses to do it on. It's home to Everton, away at Villa, away at West Ham. I mean, it's not obvious to me away at Villa. There's no point playing there. No point playing that one. I'm not quite sure why he doesn't maybe swap 5 out and then a different 5 for them. But it's it's classic Holloway. But and that isn't really. I mean, the Premier League have sort of stopped really trying to. I mean, it sets the trend, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is the end of it for the Premier League. I think they got a bit of backlash on this because they're saying that you have to have 25 named members of your squad in the Premier League, but then we'll decide which of those ones are the better ones. That's overstepping the boundaries of the Premier League. Premier League should have absolutely no interest in team selection, and you don't hear about this now. This was the case that kind of killed the Premier League's in terms of suggesting which is a strong team, which is a weak team.
So he definitely uses players, though. He uses 29 of them across the season, including 4 goalkeepers.
Yeah, well, in the Aston Villa game where Blackpool have been deemed to be playing the weakened team, Richard Kingston, who is Ghana's number 1. Now, he was signed in the summer of 2010. I think on probably some of the best PR work that Richard Kingston could have ever hoped for. So Richard Kingston, I got nothing against this guy. I just don't think he was a particularly good goalkeeper. And I've seen him live as well in South Africa. So he's generally been a reserve in Turkey with Galatasaray for forever, almost. And then he kind of breaks out and he has a couple of spells in the English Football League. I think he's at Birmingham for a short time. He's at Wigan for a short time. But if you look at his appearances, there's a clue that maybe Richard Kingston isn't that great of a goalkeeper. But in 2010, he's in between the posts for Ghana. And Ghana go on this incredible run in the World Cup. Almost like perfect storm for Ghana. And they lose to Uruguay on penalty kicks in the quarterfinal, and Richard Kingston is the principal goalkeeper. So I can understand, why Blackpool would take a chance. He's got World Cup pedigree, he's got World Cup profile. So he plays in this game, which is considered the weakened team. But he is one of 4 goalkeepers used by Blackpool in this season. Now, Matt Gilks is the number 1 for Blackpool. He gets injured. And Richard Kingston makes up most of the appearances. But Paul Rachuba, he's a former Manchester United trainee. He plays a couple of games. And also Mark Halmstad plays, he comes on as a sub, I think, when I think it's Gilks gets injured. And Graham, I couldn't help but go down the rabbit hole of, is this the most goalkeepers used in a football season? And surprisingly, it's not. It's not uncommon teams in a single league season to use 4, and sometimes in the case of Everton, just 20 seasons ago, to use 5 goalkeepers in a single league season. But I did discover one incredible statistic. I hope you're going to like this. Well, I actually do know you like it because we've done this before, as we keep saying. So Accrington Stanley, that team made famous through Ian Rush's like for drinking plenty of milk so he can avoid playing for them. In the 2014-2015 season, not only did they have 10 goalkeepers in their squad, which on its own is incredible. 10 goalkeepers in your squad.
Coach, are you going to need them all? Yeah, definitely. Definitely 10.
It's not like centre forwards where you can rotate them. It's where you can rotate goalkeepers. And Accrington Stanley do rotate their goalkeepers. Of the 10 goalkeepers in this 2014-2015, use 8 in a single league season. I emphasize league season. And every single one of those goalkeepers plays at least 2 games. I mean, coach has got a real problem. He's got more goalkeepers he could ever wish for. But clearly, by team selection, they're all not up for the task.
I think we might, at some point, have to do that Accrington Stanley side just to try and work out. There must be a series of emergency loans, keeper injury crisis, but that's an incredible stat. Absolutely brilliant. So Blackpool are going remarkably well. And by the time January the 12th, they beat Liverpool 2-1. Liverpool's goal is scored by Liverpool take the lead through Torres, who's not a bad player. Gary Taylor-Fletcher, of course, equalises, and DJ Campbell gets the winner. And at that point, I think they are probably 8th, and they got to 28 points. Everything is looking good. So as long as they don't, win one game in the next 16, they should be fine. And they win one game in the next 16, they lose 10, they slip into the bottom 3 when they lose to Wigan with about 4 or 5 games to go. The form, the belief, the momentum, everything that's got them there has collapsed. But they have one last roll of the dice, they have one last moment, and there's a sort of a glorious, and it's absolutely classic Holloway. So they, for their last home game of the season, they end up playing against Bolton Wanderers. Blackpool Bolton. If only there'd been a famous game between those two and a famous scoreline between those two. And it had to be. I mean, if anyone's going to win a game 4-3, it's going to be Ian Holloway's Blackpool. And what a kind of echo of the past, the echo of the Matthews family, Matthews final, but it should be the same scoreline, 4-3 to Blackpool.
Yeah, it's uncanny. It's incredible, really. And it's a proper yo-yo game. Just on the Liverpool win, though, you're absolutely right in terms of classic Holloway. So between this Bolton game on the 14th of March and the Liverpool win on the 12th of January, they play 16 games and they only win one, as you mentioned. They score in all but 3 of those games as well. So in 13 of those games where they fail to, in 12 of the 13 games where they failed to win, they're scoring in every game as well, including, I remember this vividly, in the end of January where they play Manchester United at home. They go 2-0 up against Manchester United. It's the genius of Berbatov that, salvages the points for Manchester United in that game at the end, very end. I think Berbatov scores the winner to make it 3-2. So, again, it's not like they're not competing in these games. They are taking the lead. They are holding a lead. But then classic Holloway, that lead's collapsing.
You're absolutely right. There are sort of pivotal moments where, bearing in mind they probably only need one more win, where they've got it. I mean, 2-0 up against United, that's when it feels like this story is there. They go to Goodison Park a couple of weeks later. They're 3-2 up in that game after an hour. Charlie Adam gets again, sort of, this is the roll of the dice approach you take with Blackpool. They lose that game 5-3. Blackpool are so close and they are absolutely going for it. But
even on the 19th of March, just to kind of just reinforcing that point in terms of, and we were talking about Blackpool just needing a point to stay up. They go to Blackburn Rovers and they're 2-0 up away to Blackburn Rovers at Ewood Park. Junior Hoylett scores in the 3rd minute to equalise for Blackburn Rovers. I've been 2-0 up. So the theme is there. Blackpool, it's almost like I think they were everyone's second favourite team in the Premier League during that season. And I think a lot of people just loved Blackpool for what they were, the size of the club, but also the philosophy and the style of play that Ian Holloway was prepared to do. They were prepared to take risks. Even when they're winning football matches, they were still taking risks.
Yeah. And the real shame is that despite that glorious win against Bolton, is that they're still in the relegation zone. The results go against them that way. So it leaves them with pretty much an impossible task. They have to go to Old Trafford. And he also won the title. But at this stage, there might be an element to which they're on the beach. But, you got to try and win at Old Trafford to stay up. Well, they go 10 minutes into the second half. There's our man, Gary Taylor-Fletcher again. They're 2-1 up. After an hour, this looks like the impossible dream is it's on again.
Yeah, they are. I remember this game as well. And in fairness, Ferguson put a fairly strong team out. So United had won the championship. It was already done and dusted. So in theory, they were just playing for the prestige of winning their final home game. And they give Blackpool a game. But yeah, not only did Blackpool go 1 up, they go 2-1 up in the second half. So once again, they're leading football matches. And you can't help but think, maybe if there was just a little bit of solidity or risk averseness to Ian methods and styles, that maybe they would have got the 1-2 crucial points in these key games where they've been leading, that would have sustained a second season in the Premier League. But I just don't think it was part of the script. I don't think it was part of the mandate of how Ian Holloway wanted to do it, which is commendable but stupid.
It is. It's fantastic. Well, it's what makes them brilliant. I mean, they go down on 39 points. I think Wolves, who stay up, they start up on 40. There's a slightly better goal difference. Blackpool would have only needed, and you could say this to any team. You can look at, if they clung onto points here and there. But this particular Blackpool side, they feel like there are moments where, oh my gosh, they're going to do it. They do go down, but they go down in style, and in scoring 55 goals, that's a pretty they have earned themselves a rare bit of Premier League history.
Yes, they have. And what is that little particular bit of Premier League history, Graham?
So they are the side that gets relegated by scoring the most goals, 55 goals, and they do it by an absolute distance. I have painstakingly gone through every table to have a look at this, and there's very few sides that have even scored 50 goals, and even the two that are closest, Middlesbrough, are the ones that come closest, and 1 year is the year they actually only go down because of a points deduction. So it's a slightly artificial relegation place for them. And then they do Middlesbrough score 54 goals in one season while getting relegated. But that is in, I think, the very first Premier League season, which the league was 22 teams. So they play 4 more matches. It says absolutely everything about how Ian Holloway approached it. And it was just enormous fun. And if you are going to be Blackpool and you are going to be one of these teams that has one season in the Premier League, I know everything doesn't. There's a lot of football pre-Premier League, but for the benefit of this, we look at some of these kind of one season wonders in the Premier League era. If you're going to do it, I think it's impossible to think of another team that has done it with such style, albeit that it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, Blackpool are, I don't know if they would be proud of this, but they are one of the 4 members of what I've coined the One and Done Club. So they, in the Premier League era, only 4 teams have had a single season in the Premier League, and it goes all the way back almost to the beginning. Swindon Town in 93, 94, where Glenn Hoddle had got them promoted, and then at moved on to Chelsea, leaving, I think, John Gorman in charge of the Yeah, so they conceded 100 goals. So that's pretty spectacular. Barnsley in 97, 98, they were quite a fun team to watch. They had a single season in the top flight as well, and they conceded 82 goals. Blackpool, as we know, 39 points, which is incredible. 39 points would generally keep you in the Premier League most seasons. In fact, the previous 6 or 7 seasons, 39 points would have been enough comfortably to sustain Premier League football. And recently, and I think these are, the latest inductee into this One and Done Club is Luton Town. They did it a bit of style, 23-24. They came up, they only had 6 wins. They did score 52 goals, conceded 85. And they were fairly entertaining. They were quite charismatic as well, because they had that incredible Kenilworth Road ground that hasn't been updated since the 1980s. It's only the plastic pitch that's been replaced. Everything else is exactly the same. So they had a bit of character to the Premier League. Yeah, one and done. There's 4. And Blackpool are, unfortunately, until they get promoted to the Premier League for a second time, part of that club.
So, yes, Blackpool go down. If it was just about goal scores, they would have finished 8th. They try equal 8th, but there you go. Unfortunately, there's a defensive side to the picture. Fair play to Blackpool and Ian Holloway. They have a fair crack at getting back into the division. As I say, they get to the playoff final the following season, but they just don't get over the line. And since then, it has been something, a gradual decline and slide, currently battling away in League One after, I think, the mighty Steve Bruce had a little spell there early this season. The new owners, the Oystons, finally left 2019. I think that finally resolved it, but it's still some challenges at Blackpool. And Ian Holloway has gone on to become this wasn't a flash in the pan for him, because actually he returns to the Premier League with Crystal Palace.
He does, yeah, where he departs from Blackpool. So his Premier League journey continues, albeit for a brief spell.
Yeah, and Ian Holloway continues. And I think this is the nice thing about doing this story. I mean, Ian Holloway's managed over 1,000 games. It's difficult to say that he doesn't retain the enthusiasm, because he so evidently does in his interviews. I don't think he cares. Not in a nasty way. I mean, I think he cares about winning, but I don't think he cares what anyone thinks anymore. He's quite happy to kind of abuse his own fans as much as commentators or anything. But he's just a one man. He's a whirlwind, and I think you can't help but enjoy the ride with Ian Holloway.
He is one of these incredible, and there's many of them in football, and especially around the lower leagues. You know, his contribution is, in terms of his playing days, over 600 games he's played. As a manager, as you mentioned, Graham, over 1,000 games managed as well. So, and he's incredibly charismatic. He's a wonderful character, but he's been in football all of this time and he's never really won anything in terms of what people regard as the major stuff. So trophies, championships, even like, divisional championships. I think he's had one. I think he won a football league with Bristol Rovers as a player. And I think he won the championship playoff, as we talked about with Blackpool. But other than that, he's never really won anything. But I think this just tells us that winning stuff generally can be a bit overrated and there's so much more to football. And Ian Holloway absolutely typifies why football is this incredible game, that you don't need major honours. You don't need minor honours to contribute massively. He's a brilliant contributor to English football history and he deserves his place and respect in those lines. But in terms of where, if you get into the high level stuff and they say, show us your medals, Ian Holloway's got nothing to show. If you say, show us your character, Ian Holloway's contribution is higher than most people in the English game.
So, he's not won anything in his career except a lot of friends. There you go. Right. So that's a good enough time to get into the rankings. As a reminder, we have 5 categories of greatness, all-time greats at the top, true greats, a mid-tier category, touch greatness, edge greatness, and blinker greats at the bottom. So has anything changed in the week since I asked you this question last time, or are you still inclined to put this team as blinkered greats?
Yeah, nothing's changed at all, Graham. So they are 100% great. Lynn's never going to shift from that. They're not even conventionally a great team. And I think this is why we love doing this, because we're not just going to do the classic teams, which we've been doing for the past few weeks. Some very, very great teams. We do some great teams from a different spectrum. And that's why we have this lovely, broad range of greatness. They don't win any honours. Their peak was short, but they're a great football story. And that's what we're talking about. It's a great football story from a football team with a deep, old club history as well. Quite an important football team and a unique manager with an incredible public voice. So absolutely blinkered greats all day long. Never ever going to be anything more than that.
And I think it's an embrace the blinkered greats. I think they absolutely sum it up. They are, if you're a Blackpool fan, this is the best team you've watched for generations. And they don't really touch the sides of football. But they did make a difference. I think you summed it up. I think with the exception of probably Blackburn and kind of rival teams up there, I think everyone would have wanted Ian Holloway's Blackpool to get over the line. Had they got over the line, maybe you could start talking about something else. But I think we have to say Ian Holloway's Blackpool, blinkered greats. Good stuff, Jamie. Almost as good the second time round. Or was it better?
I don't know. We blur into these things so quickly these days. I tend to forget them as soon as we've done them. But I did enjoy that. And I do enjoy this story. And one thing we didn't mention that I think is absolutely great about Blackpool FC is they play in a tangerine football kit. And that, for me, is as good as it gets.
Very much so. And you have adorned a tangerine orange kit for the occasion. Is that Blackpool?
This is not. This is giving you an opportunity to link into our net podcast episode. This is the Netherlands 1988 Euro winning shirt, which I am adorning right now in the beautiful orange.
Absolutely. Dutch football. And that's where we're going next. We are going to the Eredivisie, but in classic style. We're not going for any of the, we're not doing Ajax or PSV or Feyenoord. We are going to follow the David Carney Bridge and we are going to go to FC 20 and Steve McLaren.
Who knew there was a David Carney Bridge?